Okay, hi, my name is Jamie, and this is my partner. We're going to be talking about or arguing on whether we think felons should have the legal right to vote. So I'm going to be arguing the affirmative, and she's going to be arguing for the negative side of it. So today I'm going to be addressing the issue that we have in this country that dehumanizes felons and takes away felons' legal right to be voting. In 18 states, felons lose their voting rights during incarceration and for a period of time after, typically while on parole and or probation. Voting rights are automatically restored after this time period. Former felons may also have to pay any outstanding fees, fines, or reinstitution before their voting rights are restored as well. This is a quote from the National Conference of State Legislators and was recently reported actually April 2021, the beginning. So it's a very new quote taken. So taking away somebody's legal rights to vote because they have been in jail is not fair it's not fair at all, and it's actually the opposite of what this country really stands for and seems to stand for. So Time Magazine Reynolds Holding also brings up a good quote and says we should be finding ways to get more voters to the polls, not looking for excuses to keep them away. So instead of prohibiting felons from voting, let's require them to do it. That way they will continue to pay their debt to society long after they walk out of prison. He brings up a really good point. Having a felon vote is very unique and adds perspective and diversity to any conversation when it comes to voting. Everybody, or even when disagreeing with the person, the information makes us stronger as a society. And that's what this country stands for, just to have diversity, and everybody has the right to speak on what their opinion is. Everyone should have the right to vote and use their voice. Silencing somebody because they are a felon or were a felon just seems completely unjust. Although giving felons the right to vote when inside jail seems unfair and does not make sense to some people, the least we can do is change the voting rights for felons who come out of jail and do not have access to these rights as American citizens. It's very hard to get these voting rights back. Most people would agree on this, that felons should not be able to vote, that people who are in jail should not have access to be voting as American citizen. But the unfairness for these felons when they come out of jail is not fair. Those who have committed less crimes or less harmful crimes, for example, I believe do have the right to vote when they are in jail. We live in a democracy, and having a voice is what we all stand for. Whose role is it to take somebody's voice away just because they commit crimes or a few crimes that are not harmful to others? Understanding that some people may commit crimes to harm others, what about those who commit crimes once and all of their rights are taken away? Another quote, when people finish their sentences and return to society, we let them have their right to pursue a life that they want back. That means they can get married, have children, own property, obtain a driver's license. You can buy alcohol if you want, although guns are usually off limits. You don't lose your freedom of religion or abandon the right of self-incrimination. If we don't trust people with a felony to make appropriate decisions at the ballot box, then we are communicating to people that we think that they cannot change their lives. This quote is pulled from Connect USA and was reported in 2019. This brings up a really good point that we need to let people who are past felons or felons be able to change their lives when they come out of jail, or even when they are in jail. They are given opportunity to change their lives, and taking rights away from them makes them think that they can't change their lives. Some people come out of jail and realize that they want to completely change their lives after serving time, no matter how long, for something that they wrongly did. Taking away their voting rights makes those who are getting out of jail seem as though that they can never change their life. We have to give these people the opportunity to be able to change their lives. Prisoners are not more or less in this country, and we need to stop seeing them as less than everybody else. If you think about it, there are things that we vote on when it comes to jails, and it does not seem fully right that most of the votes on these decisions are made by people who have never even been to jail. Felons who are in jail or have been in jail know how it is and provide insight on certain subjects. It seems unfair to vote on subjects about choosing decisions for jails when most people voting have never experienced it for themselves. Felons are humans too and deserve to have their voice towards speaking up on issues that they have experienced and know about. Okay.
Okay, the proposal to automatically restore civil rights when leaving prison would restore rights without providing a reasonable period of time to determine if felons are truly rehabilitated or still living a life of crime. There is a price to pay when breaking the law, and this ruling doesn't just apply to fines paid to the state, it also includes court ordered restitution to criminals' innocent victims. Who is looking out for their best interest? The United States has a practical standard for a person to contribute their input in government laws. Uh, in 2016, Roger Clegg, who is president of Center for Equal Opportunity, argued, if you aren't willing to follow the law yourself, then you can't demand a role in making the law for everyone else, which is what you do when you vote. We don't let everyone vote, not children, not non-citizens, not the mentally incompetent, and not felons, because we have certain objective. We have a minimum standard of responsibility and commitment to our laws that must be met before someone is given a role in the Solomon enterprise of self-government. People who have committed a serious crime against their fellow citizens don't meet these standards. Voting is a right, and the right to vote can be restored after probation or parole. President of Center for Equal Opportunity, Roger Clegg, continues to write, the right to vote can be restored to felons, but it should be done carefully on a case-by-case basis after a person has shown that he or she has really turned over their old decisions, not automatically on the day someone walks out of prison. The unfortunate truth is that most people who walk out of prison will be walking back in. Felons should be required to prove that they are reformed before being allowed to vote, because people who break laws should not be allowed to input their decision in making new laws. If an individual cannot be disciplined to practice and respect the current laws, then how do we as a society expect these felons to practice new laws that are created? It's a revolving door effect of restoring felons' rights, only then to revoke them due to a new criminal offense. And that would ultimately diminish the integrity of our democratic government and the rule of law. In other words, it would be unreasonable for our government to restore felons' voting rights the moment they walk out of prison. But then if the felon gets sent back to prison, where they would not be able to vote, then it just would not make sense, which is a continuous cycle of giving and taking away a felon's voting eligibility because the criminal did not follow the law, which could have been prevented. Statistics show us that felons that do not seek immediate rehabilitation are prone to return to prison within the next couple years. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, a study of felons in 30 states revealed that 2 out of 3, or the equivalent of 67.8% of felons, were arrested for a new crime within 3 years after release of their offense. And 3 out of 4 felons, or the equivalent of 76.6%, were rearrested within 5 years after their release. In fact, more than one-third of all prisoners who were rearrested within 5 years of being released from prison were arrested within the first 6 months after release, with more than half arrested by the end of the first year. Considering these large numbers, supporting that majority of felons do not seek rehabilitation and continue their same lifestyle, how are we as a public supposed to trust their judgment in making noble decisions for the rest of society? Every felony is a serious breach of the bonds that unite our society. Rather than obligating the government to initiate the restoration process, it is reasonable to require felons to ask to have their rights restored. Um, Also, felons should demonstrate rehabilitation by living crime-free during a waiting period after the completion of their sentences. Felons earn the designation of being a convicted felon by breaking the law. So they should also earn the restoration of civil rights by abiding by the law. Applying the paid the debt in prison argument also wrongly suggests that completion of a criminal sentence signals rehabilitation. When there are no long-term consequences to committing a crime, people are not going to take any repercussions seriously. However, when people have a lot to lose, such as time spent in prison or time away from their family, and when they lose rights outside of prison, people might reconsider some decisions. In this case, the right to vote is not taken away by government. Initially, it is handed over by the offender the moment he or she commits the crime. Nonetheless, um, why would it not be reasonable for states to have the right to decide what constitutes full payment of a felon's debt to society, including the restoration of voting rights? In Washington and other states, prisons are already really packed. So using fines and restitution in felony sentences is a good public policy because it offers a rational alternative to long and costly prison sentences. Governor of Florida, Rick Scott, speaks on this concept. He says that felons seeking restoration of rights should be required to demonstrate that they desire and deserve clemency by applying only after they have shown they are willing to abide by the law. The restoration of civil rights can be a significant part of the rehabilitation of criminal offenders and can assist them in re-entry into society. It is important that this form of clemency be granted in a deliberate, thoughtful manner that prioritizes public safety and creates incentives to avoid any further criminal activity.
Okay, I see all of the points that you bring up on this issue, but as a country who stands proudly for democracy and freedom of speech, why is this being taken away from felons? These felons are people too who have committed crimes in the past and deserve the right to change their lives, and taking away the voting right does the complete opposite of this. You bring up the statistics of the numbers of people who have gone back to jail, but what about the people who have changed their lives? I think that we should also bring up the statistics of those. University of Georgia reports the study estimates that as of 2010, there were 19 million people in the United States that have a felony record, including those who have been to prison, jail, or on felony probation. 19 million people in 2010 had a felony record, this meaning 19 million people struggled to have their voting rights. This is a huge number, and how many of these committed one crime and now have their voting rights taken away? Even those of the 19 million who have committed multiple crimes, maybe them wanting to change their lives and not being able to have a form of speaking out and using their voice on issues seems unfair. Like I stated in my affirmative, we need to treat felons or past felons much more like humans. They deserve to be in control of changing their lives and starting over after serving their time for their wrongdoing. They have access to many things when they get out of jail in order to change their life, Voting rights needs to be added onto this list of rights that felonies gain back once serving time. Understanding that those who are incapable of voting have broken too many laws should not be able to vote. Why not set boundaries on who is and who is not allowed to vote? We should be offering those with less parole time the legal right to vote. There are many different ways we can address this issue, but also continue to make it fair to those who do not believe in those who are in jail for harsh crimes, thinking that they should not legally be able to vote. We could look at the people who have committed light crimes and are serving time and give them their legal right to vote as American citizens, the chance to vote. To some people, voting could be important to them. It should be to all of us. We should want more and more people going out to vote every single year, definitely not taking people's legal right to vote away. Those who have shown that they've changed their life after getting out of jail and serving time deserve to have their right to vote back. They show they changed their life and deserve to use their voice, not just to be put in a statistic of people who are in jail or who have been in jail. In 2020, Proposition 17 was put out, which is a constitutional amendment that allowed people on parole for felony convictions to vote in California. This was not allowed, and California was one of 3 states that require a person convicted of felonies to complete their prison and parole sentences before having the right to vote again. As of 2020, 19 states allowed people convicted of felonies but who were on parole to vote. 17 of these states did not allow people to vote while imprisoned. 2, Maine and Vermont, allow people who are in prison to vote. This was a quote taken from the website Ballotpedia. Things are changing, as we can see, slowly, but there still are many states, like including ours, who have a really strict voting rights on people who are in parole or who are on a low parole time.
Okay. A person who breaks the laws may fairly have been thought to have abandoned the right to participate in making new laws prior to their offense. If a person weighs out the consequences and then proceeds to continue to partake in criminal activity, then there is not enough consequence in the prison system alone. Therefore, if prison alone does not deter people from living a life of crime, then there needs to be further action that makes criminal offense not worth the consequence. The concept of felon disenfranchisement laws are justified on the basis of John Locke's notion of the social contract. It can be deemed reasonable for a state to decide that perpetrators of serious crimes shall not take part in electing the legislators who make the laws, the executives who enforce the laws, the prosecutors who will try them for further violations, or the judges who are to consider their cases. Second, it is appropriate to consider that these consequences are a part of punishment for committing any type of crime. After all, if you do the crime, you should do the time and pay the fine. With this being said, criminal punishment can be meted out in various ways, including imprisonment, fines, probation, and the withdrawal of certain rights and privileges. Prison is meant to be a form of punishment. So while rehabilitation is meant to restore and normalize an individual's state of mind by training and therapy, prison is just supposed to be like a form of punishment. And with this being said, prison and rehabilitation offer different outcomes. A person has to make a personal decision if they want to seek proper guidance. The state nor the government forces these criminals to go to rehabilitation, and so when someone does seek rehabilitation, that action alone shows the desire to improve oneself and their decision making. It is evident that without proper rehabilitation, these individuals will struggle with living a life away from crime. People will continue to partake in criminal activity because this is the only lifestyle that they have been exposed to and know without having proper guidance. When a criminal is put in prison, they are surrounded by other criminals with like-minded desires uh, for a very long term, like a lot of years. So, how can we expect these criminals to come out of prisons with a good sense from right and wrong? A prison sentence has always resulted in loss of freedom and a loss of democratic rights for the duration of a prisoner's sentence. The main point of a prison sentence is to show the offender and society as a whole that criminal behavior results in loss of freedom and most of the rights that freedom offers. If there is no standard outside of prison, then how will people learn to refrain from criminal activity? Ultimately, full rights and privileges are not always restored to convicts, even though one may argue that they have paid their debt to society by serving some time in prison. However, to keep these prisoners from returning to their old habits, offering incentives like attending rehabilitation to gain back their voting rights would make people want to earn their way back into society rather than handing it right back to them. When something is given to someone without working for it, then these criminals will not understand the privilege there is behind voting. An example of this is under federal law. Anyone who has a charge pending or has been convicted of a crime punishable by imprisonment for 1 year or more cannot serve on a jury. So, if someone who has a charge pending against them, if they're considered incapable of sitting in judgment of the fate of a single litigant, it does not seem unreasonable to say that someone convicted of a felony cannot help shape the fate of a city, a state, let alone the entire nation.
Although your points of the negative sides brings up good points and reasons felons should not be able to vote, I believe that no matter what, in a situation, felons should not have those rights be taken away from them. Understanding that some felons are not capable of making decisions when it comes to politics or voting, there should definitely be some sort of boundaries on who has the right to vote and who doesn't, like I stated with the parole and who has less time. Something should be done about that. Those that are capable of voting should legally have the right to be able to do so, just like we do. Felons should not be silenced and labeled as only felons or past felons and only seen as people who are in jail or people who have been in jail. They served their time and most of them know what they did wrong and come out of jail better people and want to change their lives. So we need to help them grow from the things that they've done. We often like to change ourselves after doing something wrong in our life. So why do we not accept it for these people? We don't let them grow and move on from something. Understanding that obviously felons, you're committing a crime which is bigger than like failing a test or something, but we need to give people the option to grow. That's what the jails are, to put people in a place to show them what they did wrong. So why are we silencing them and keeping them quiet, punishing them even when they're out? Why do we not let felons do the same as we do ourselves? A quote I will end it with is, if we are serious about calling ourselves a democracy, we must firmly establish that the right to vote is inevitable and the universal principle that applies to all American citizens 18 years or older, period. As American citizens, all of us are entitled to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and all other freedoms enshrined in our Bill of Rights. We are also entitled to vote. This is a quote from Bernie Sanders in April 2019. He brings up the issue that voting right is a right of citizenship. We are silencing millions of people every year by continuing to not allow them to vote and taking away their right. We have the power to speak up for when something is unjust, and that is exactly what we need to be doing. These people are clearly not given a voice, so we must use our voice for them.